Thank you, Brian. Okay.
Welcome to tonight's presentation. My name is Brian Sullivan. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. I'm going to talk about breaking into design and research, understanding what's being asked in a user experience interview. I have been a user experience manager or director for a while. I've had to hire over 30 people. I want to give you a little bit of information about my background. So let's just go to the next slide. So I'm a design strategist and user experience researcher for over 20 years at Sabre, so the big travel company. So if you've ever taken a flight, taken a cruise, had a rental car, stayed at a hotel, a lot of the back end systems are managed by Sabre. As was mentioned earlier, I did found the big design conference with some of my friends. I guess it was about 18 years ago. There's a best-selling book I happen to write a chapter on, which is 97 things every UX practitioner should know. So I wrote one of the chapters in there. It was really odd that it's a bestseller. So welcome to Amazon categories, everyone. I founded the User Experience Dallas Meetup. We have about 5,000 members at this point. We're going to start having in-person events too, like Bob Thomas had mentioned earlier. We're going to be following, the standard CDC protocols. I'm an industry speaker, speak at South by Southwest, UXPA Big Design. About 10 years ago, I had an odd thing happen. I got put on the main stage of South by Southwest, and it got blasted all throughout. I did a talk called Design Like Da Vinci, very popular talk, which led to my first book, The Design Studio Method. I'm currently writing the second edition of that. I got invited back 2 years later and ran a workshop. Tonight's going to be a little bit like a workshop in that what you're going to see is a subset of information that I share with my students. I'm an adjunct professor in the UNT design program. I also founded the user experience certification program. I was mentioning earlier that we just went through some of these slides last night in the current cohort at SMU. I've created career ladders, education programs. You will get a different perspective tonight. This is not a meetup where you're going to go into a breakout room, meet a bunch of people. No, this is more of nuts and bolts. I call it a practical and tactical event, okay? So I always say a dream without a plan is just a wish. And tonight, we are not going to do wishful thinking. We are here to learn. Okay, some of you are looking for internships. Some of you may be transitioning. Some of you may have moved into a new role, such as a hiring manager. And you're looking at what are some questions I can ask. And we're going to have a decoder ring in about 20 minutes on what are questions for a resume, what are questions for a portfolio. But we are not doing wishful thinking tonight. A couple of years ago, I want to show you this. So first off, this is not a heat map of the heat wave going through the United States. It is not a COVID-19 map. This is a couple of years old. It comes from Onward Search. And what they did is they calculated the most popular locations for user experience jobs in the United States, right? What's really nice is that, if you're up in the area of New Hampshire, you have a really big bubble there and a couple of small ones. I would say that, when we think about things now, there's a lot of remote positions too. But what's really nice for, I know we had people in Chicago, people in New Hampshire, people in Boston. We had people in Florida. There's a few people in Dallas. We have like pretty hot markets, and the fact that everything is remote is pretty awesome. I want to give you a stat on the next slide, okay? Julia, I want you to think about this for a moment. You ready? The average time that a hiring manager looks at your resume is 7.4 seconds.
That's encouraging.
Right. Not only that, a recruiter. So hiring managers and recruiters, they scan them, right? I want to show you a resume of a young man. He went to UTD and he was asking me, Mr. Sullivan, I have graduated from UTD. I got a full ride there, and I cannot get a user researcher interview to save my life. Can you help me? Julia, what do you think I said to him right away?
Yes, I would love to know.
It's on the slide here.
Oh, the average time a hiring manager or recruiter looks at your resume is 7.4 seconds.
Yes, I said, you have a bad resume. I don't even have to look at it. You have a bad resume. So he sent this over to me. You ready, Julia?
Yes.
Oh my God. Did it take you 7.4 seconds, Julia, to almost instantly reject this resume?
Yeah, I got there pretty fast.
Yes, it was less than 7.4 seconds. It is the blink of an eye. This is a student-based resume, duty-based. Look at his email. Kevin loves golf at Gmail. I swear to God, it was something like that. Now, Bob Thomas, I know you. I want you to know I changed the names to protect the innocent. It's not Kevin Johnson. He was a basketball player that played for the Phoenix Suns that I really liked. And my little brother's name is Kevin. So this is a call out to them. Okay. And here's a list of reasons why this resume, let's be honest, sucks as a hiring manager. You have an opportunity to be like Santa Claus when you're going through resumes. You have the naughty list and you have the nice list, and you instantly filter them. So that's what's happening. So I want you to imagine this, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine that your boss, let's say you got the best job you could ever imagine, new job, it's your dream job. You've been there for a year. Maybe you're fresh out of college, right? So we had a person from, Michigan, Big Blue, great, fantastic. You get the UX job of your dreams, and they say to you, hey, we got a little bit of budget, right? To hire, another UX researcher. I want you to look at this resume. Does this go on the naughty list or the to be interviewed list? So the first question that gets asked when somebody looks at your resume is, would I bring this person in for an interview? So ladies and gentlemen, we talk about empathy. We need to have empathy for the hiring managers. We need to have empathy for the recruiters. Why? Because they get to see garbage like this every day. Kevin sent this to me. I immediately called him, and what I said to him is, Kevin, you have lost your way, W-A-Y, because this resume is going to get thrown out. Way is, who are you? W-A-Y. I can tell you who he is by looking at this. This is a student, because if you look real close, what in the hell is Design 1 and Design 2? What is the IXD Lab 1 and 2? What are all of these college classes doing at the top of the resume? I don't get to the fact that he's a freelancer, which, by the way, is misspelled on this, and it was misspelled because he didn't do spell check. This gets immediately thrown out. So even before he starts writing, I needed to do an interview with Kevin. That gets into personal branding. Okay, so when you build an online presence, the first thing you have to do is look at personal branding. And personal branding is not bragging, ladies and gentlemen. It's really just trying to answer the question, who are you? And it's good for having conversations. It's good for networking. It's good for an online presence. It's not bragging, okay? There are a couple of things when we think about branding. There's that inside self. It's who you want to be. It's your true and authentic self. It's kind of the purpose of your life. And then there's the outside self. There's your personality, your style, your habits, your behavior. right? Your outside self, it's what you project out into the world. You might be interested to learn that your inside self and your outside self usually differs. So the person that you aspire to be may not be the vibes that you're throwing out into the world. And what's interesting is, have you ever thought for a moment, think about the last 2 or 3 people that have asked you for advice? That's your outside self. But that may not have anything to do with your inside self. But when you put those two things together, that's your brand. It's what people say about you when you aren't even there. That's also known as integrity. Okay. So there's your inside self, your outside self, that becomes your personal brand. There's a wonderful book by Denise Anderson on this. I can send it in chat a little bit later. Kevin has no personal brand. You guys remember this? I'm going to give you a networking tip. And you'll probably have a little bit of homework because, you know, Uncle Brian is a college professor and he gives homework. That's just the way it is. So if we were to if I was to give Kevin branding advice, which I did a interview, you need to have a personal branding caption and you need to have a personal bio statement. That's the kind of the first thing. It's who are you? And your personal branding caption is 3 words. It's 2 adjectives and a noun to be exact. A curious user researcher with 3 years plus experience, blah, 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 blah. So it's almost an encapsulation of kind of his current state of his work experience, who he aspires to be, right? So the outside self is the first sentence. The inside self is, I enjoy interviewing people, understanding pain points, making recommendations. We have a strong personal branding statement. Here's the cool thing. Tara, imagine this. This is also a networking template. We will do it like this. Hello, my name is Kevin. I am a curious user researcher. The last cool project I worked on was fill in the blank. That project was to do XYZ. I learned these 3 really badass things. Bang, bang, bang. How cool is that? Why, Tara? Because we're the cool people, right? So you can use this as a networking template. Now, let's do it in reverse. Bob, we're user researchers. We're the people that ask questions. We're going to go up and maybe we go up to Julia and we don't know her. We're going to say, hey, tell me your name. Question. Who are you? What do you do for a living? She gives us the answer. Tell me about the last cool project you worked on. Oh, what was that project about? Hey, what did you learn? And because we're the cool networking guy, Bob, we say, how cool is that? Right? So this is a nice template for us to use. It's our personal branding template. It's our identity. It's our statement. So this is the vibe that we also throw out into the world. It's also the thing that we need to have in our resume and in our portfolio. And ladies and gentlemen, this is probably the first question that gets asked to you, okay, in a networking situation or in a user experience interview. So I wanted to give you a little bit of template to work with right away so that you have that. A lot of people, when they're first looking for a user experience job, suffer from imposter syndrome, and they don't have a very good personal branding statement. They don't know who they are, so they fumble, and that just confuses someone. So your homework for tonight is to do a couple of things. Work on your personal branding caption, 2 adjectives and a noun, right? The noun's easy because that's the job you want, right? Accessibility, strategy, research, design. And then the 2 adjectives, that becomes, you know, curious, you know, interesting, dynamic, you know, whatever your adjectives are, think about those. Then also have your personal branding statement and then work with it in a networking template with your friends and colleagues. Takes a little bit of practice, but you know, there's some networking events and it sounds like there's some jobs coming up, a couple of conferences, hint, hint, that you could use this for, right? All right, let's get into resume essentials, right? we have a couple of people in the waiting room. So do you want me to let them in?
Yes, please, Brian. Thank you. We
All right.
we had some people that were being asked for a passcode for some reason.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, how do I let them in?
If you hit admit all,
Where is it?
um,
Maybe it's here. That's disable, blah, 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 participants. Is it in security?
I can't picture it. I'm so sorry.
I have disabled the waiting room. We'll just do that.
Yeah,
Let them all come in.
yeah, maybe they'll all pop in that way.
Oh, there we go. I could do an admit all.
Yay, the
Also,
number.
I see, there we go. Awesome, here we go.
Brian,
All right, so we're back to
apologies about that.
no worries. No worries. We're all friends here. We're beyond that.
Thank you,
So we're
everyone
going to
who-
go.
Sorry. Here's
What's
Brian.
that?
He's awesome. I was just saying a quick welcome to everyone, and here's Brian. He's awesome. Tune in.
Yeah,
and-
we're learning stuff. Watch the video afterwards, right?
Perfect.
So you got in at the right time because we're getting into resume essentials. Okay. So y'all remember a little bit earlier, I showed you, this is Kevin Johnson. I gave you a little bit of homework. I talked with Kevin and I said, man, you need a personal branding statement. So I did, a little bit of work with him. I explained to him, you have to have a personal branding statement. You have to have a caption because that's your identity. It's what you throw out into the world. You need to have a real, like a real email, not kevinlovesgolf@gmail.com. Include links to a portfolio. It can be more visual if you want. Explain your impact on projects, kind of describe what makes you special. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't bragging. And I'll get into a little bit more of some resume tips and tricks here in a moment. Okay, it's a little bit pixelated on the right, but after 30 minutes, Kevin went from that to that. Personal branding statement is at the top, all the experiences at the very top. He was what's known as a Clark Scholar, and he had won awards. None of that is coming out in the other resume. He's had speaking engagements. He had a duty-based resume on the left. I designed screens using Adobe XD. Well, no kidding. Every designer does that. You need to show the business impact. I updated a website that has over 80,000 visitors every year. I consulted with 57 different stakeholders. Okay, well, that's interesting. I collaborated with the product team in Iceland and India. Okay, right, now we're seeing some impact. I developed a backend using Node.js and MongoDB back in the day. Okay, so he's got some skills, some coding skills. We can now start to have a deeper discussion. I'm getting a sense for who Kevin Johnson is. There's a link to his portfolio. Now it's kjohnson@gmail.com, not Kevin Loves Golf. I can call him, I can text him, I kind of know what he is. Within 5 days of sending out this resume, the updated one, Kevin was able to get a couple of interviews. Within 3 weeks, he got 2 job offers. Okay, resumes still count. There is this filter that people look through. Sometimes it's not a person. Sometimes it's going to be software. Okay. Now I'd mentioned to Kevin, you can make things a little bit more visual. This is Catherine Plone. Catherine was a person that really only had student-based experience, but look at everything that she has accomplished in her student career. It's very visual. You see her skills, you see her membership, published work in journals, ton of awards, and then a ton of really good projects. So she threw herself out there and positioned herself that way. So you can be a student and still have a really good resume. I'm going to talk now about the power of networks. Here's an interesting thing. Julia, I am an introvert that's learned to be a situational extrovert.
Me
right?
too, Brian. Yes.
Now, here's another interesting number for us, Julia. You ready?
Yes.
Take that in for a
Oh,
second.
yes.
3 out of every 4 people get their current job through networking. So if you are an introvert and you're not putting yourself out there, that becomes a problem. Okay. That's why I kind of start this with you've got to have personal branding, and you got to be able to have that networking template, because you've got to be able to have a conversation, right? And so this might be Nikki talking to Alex, and Nikki is saying, hey, my name is Nikki Stone. I am a fill in the blank. The last school project I worked on was fill in the blank, right? Well, this gets into a book that I'm going to recommend called The Proximity Principle by Ken Coleman. This particular book I found to be very powerful because it's not necessarily your first contact, it's your second or third contact. So it's the friend of a friend, but there are ways to get connected to the friend of a friend, right? We kind of saw that earlier today when Julia, Tara, and team were talking about, hey, these companies are hiring, right? Hey, who's looking, right? So they're making it super easy. I had sent in a chat message to the young man in Chicago. I think, hey, I ran the accessibility program. We already have something in common, right? So the proximity principle is really important. Going to meetups like this is really important. In fact, you should tell all your friends about this meetup because it's an awesome meetup. I'm also reminded of this other book. Again, I am a situational introvert, but I'm also a numbers person. Okay. This is Joe Sweeney. You can already tell Joe's a sales guy. Okay. Straight up sales guy, but he has this concept of networking being a contact sport. And he talks about in the book different ways that he continues to network every day. So being a numbers guy, he tries to make sure that he has connections, 15 connections with people he already knows. Then he has at least 10 connections with close family and friends. He tries to have one, or he tries to meet one new person every single day. Imagine taking that challenge on, as an introvert. Well, Joe talks to everybody, no problem. I'm not saying that you do that, but if you have goals to try to meet people, it helps out. For me, this particular template is really helpful. I call this a story stack. I can tell this story 100 times over, right? The other thing that I will tell you is who you know gets you in the door, what you know keeps you there. So this quote's pretty powerful, but when we think about networks, you have a door person potentially with 500 different doors connecting you to 1,000 other doors. Okay. The friend of a friend concept. It's a multiplier effect. So think of it that way. Okay. But it's also really important. Don't forget that second sentence there. What you know gets you there. All right. So we'll briefly go over common resume tips, and then we'll get to the question behind the question. Seth Rogen has this really cool quote that I like. You are not your resume, you are your work. And this gets into when you start to write your resume, some people will have imposter syndrome. Some people will feel like they're bragging. Some people will talk about what the team did, not what they did. Ladies and gentlemen, they're not hiring a team, they are hiring you. So we need to kind of understand that. So here's some really amazing resume words to kind of get you started. Notice how all of these are verbs, right? Have these at the start of a sentence. I increase, reduce, improve, train, led, achieve, spearheaded, strengthen, maximize, manage, optimize. Have some brand names, have some client names. Throw that in there. Have a number in there, right? Here's some amazing numbers. The number of people you manage, how you improve the adoption on a site or an app, how you reduce handle time in a call center, the percentage of sales that got increased, the number of times a page got looked at, right? Those are those bullets. So imagine again, having increased, reduced, improved, throw a number, and then you say, I increased adoption for FedEx. Holy shit. I want to know what you did. I'm interested. People look at that. Okay. You need to understand on every project the one metric that matters and how you impacted it. Okay. Some other resume items. And again, Kevin didn't have any of that in the first one. Link to your portfolio site, personal branding, awards, patents, education, a skills section. You might have logos. Please include your contact info. If you can just do these things, your resume looks a lot better. It's really not that hard when you break it down, but always start with personal branding. Who are you? I would encourage you to watch this video, how to prepare for a user experience interview. It's kind of a nice way to get you in the right mindset. So a lot of times it's not your skill set, it's your mindset, right? This is a nice like pep talk before going in for an interview. This is a really interesting article that, or I'm sorry, a set of slides. These are 64 interview questions that designers get from the big companies in the United States: Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, Salesforce, etc. Preparation determines success, right? So I've kind of like teed everything up. I want to go through what the topic is tonight, right? So resumes are important. There's ways to update it. If you can, get it updated, people are going to start asking you questions. Now, in this section, I want you to know the most important tool you have on your resume is your language. We kind of talked about that, but you also need to start thinking about how am I going to answer questions, because you're going to get them from recruiters. You're going to get them from team members in an interview. You're going to get them from potential hiring managers. So I break this section down. I literally want to make it black and white for everyone. I'm going to give you a very common question. And let's think of everything that's on the black side, the text, right? It's what you hear. But understand, with the hiring manager or someone else, there is the subtext. That's going to be on the white side. So here's what they say. Here's what they're really saying as a hiring manager or a hiring team. So here's a common question, and what does it really mean? And on the white side, I'm going to get you what the subtext is and then strategies to answer that. Okay? Y'all ready? Awesome. I'm going to do the same thing with portfolios, the same thing with closing out an interview. All right, here we go. First question, tell us about yourself. Dadgummit, Bob, this one's a trap, right? You've seen Star Wars. It's a trap. It's a trap. Well, what does this really mean? How'd you get into UX? How did it lead us to us, right? How did you get to us? Why did you apply for this job? That's really what they're asking, not tell us about yourself. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen, it's not really about you, it's about them. How do you fit in with the team? Okay, we have to feel empathy for the recruiters and the hiring managers. Okay, so that's the subtext. What do I do? Introduce yourself quickly, talk about what excites you, right? One person earlier today said it's accessibility. For someone else, it might be visual design. For someone else, it might be user research. And then focus immediately on how you fit in with this job, with this culture, right? Because then they're already starting to think about how you fit, right? And you're kind of talking about them, not you, even though the question is, tell us about yourself. You're already seeing yourself in this particular role and at this particular company, okay? So you can really set yourself up for success by answering the question in this way. Looks like it's a very innocent question, but if you can start to set things up, you're going to have a good interview. Preparation, again, determines success. All right, so let's go to the next common question that you might hear. What's the value of UX? Well, Bob, that's also a trick question. Dadgummit, these people are smart. You think they've been interviewing people for a while? Well, what's the subtext? Do you truly understand the field? Tell me why design is crucial. And how would you sell it to others? And again, a lot of companies are trying to, go a little bit higher on the maturity model, or to develop their design practice, maybe get new design tools, implement an accessibility practice. So can you describe the value of UX? But what they're really asking is the subtext. So if you're understanding that, here are some strategies. Explain how user experience equals business success, right? Ladies and gentlemen, oddly enough, we don't talk about how we are the money people, right? If we think about accessibility, I would just say accessible design is simply good design, and we avoid, potential lawsuits. I would say from a user research perspective, it helps us to understand user needs. That way we don't have the churn, and we have better business requirements. We have more accurate estimates. Product success depends on UX. Our customers can react to new ideas a lot faster. That's the value of UX. The value of UX is it helps the entire company be better at what they do. They deliver better products and services. And because of that, we sell more. Okay, next question. And again, we're just on the resume. What's the difference between UX and other disciplines? This is also a trap question, because we have a lot of marketing designers and graphic designers transitioning into user experience design. We asked this question to a person that took a boot camp, and when we asked them, what's the difference between the other disciplines, he did a terrible job. He started talking about his interior design practice, and we just knew that it wasn't going to be a good fit for the company and that he was transitioning. Well, the subtext here is, do you know the difference between UX and UI, graphic design and UX design, market research and user research? And can you explain it to other people, such as executive stakeholders? So give an example of a project, right? Describe how you would prioritize your UX work. Explain the different UX project or UX roles on a project, right? You have research, you have UX design, you have visual design, you have usability testing, right? So if you can kind of talk about the roles, and maybe you have a project that you've worked on, you're kind of showing the difference, right? And you're getting them to understand that you have a specific process too. Walk us through your user experience workflow. Well, what are they really asking here? How do you solve problems? Are you user focused all the time, right? And can you collaborate? Explain your process with an example, walk them through each step, wrap up with challenges and your next steps. I think one of the things that people don't do here is talk about their challenges. They tend to want to talk about their successes. I think it's okay here in your user experience workflow to say, we had a challenge reaching out to certain types of people, and it took us a while to figure out what we needed to do. So we overcame this obstacle by doing X, Y, Z. And it humanizes you as a person, but it also showcases you as a problem solver. So I think a lot of times when we talk about our user experience workflow, we tend to leave out challenges. It humanizes us. One of the number one things that people look for in a workflow is, what is your strategy? What is your research? What is your design and usability? If you just have that, I think you're really doing a good job talking about workflow and process. Do you consider yourself a team player, right? And this is a trap question too. And it's really, do you work well with others? Can you talk to developers and product managers? And the other thing I think they're asking really deep down is, are you open to feedback, right? Can I work with you? That's really what they're asking deep down. Emphasize always that you're open to feedback. Give an example of collaboration. and really relate how feedback, it's a part of your process every step of the way, right? And it's really about feedback and collaboration. I think that's really what they're asking here. All right, tell us about your most or least successful UX design project. What's cool about this question is you've probably interested them a little bit at this point when they're looking at your resume. They're really asking, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Do you learn from mistakes? And honestly, are you humble and teachable? That's what they're interested in. So just explain project success is the team reaching its goal. Ladies and gentlemen, no one person builds a design, right? You're going to have research, you're going to have design, you're going to have developers, product managers, you're going to have users, you're going to have stakeholders. Highlight how you've collaborated with many of those stakeholders and explain that this is how you mitigate failure. And if a project was successful, it's because of everybody. If it wasn't as successful or you failed from it, that's okay. The company didn't invest in it. They didn't waste their time. That's actually a good thing, especially if you're doing something like experimentation or lab-based work. How do you practice universal design? Again, here we're starting to get into a design phrase, if you will, universal design. Well, the subtext here is, do you know about inclusive design? Do you design for every type of user? Do you design on a spectrum, the novice user, the mainstream user, the expert user? To give an example, in the travel industry, we have a persona for, we call them travel arrangers. They arrange travel for other people. Infrequent travelers, they might take one trip a year. Road warriors, salespeople, they're always on the road. VIP travelers, so think the CFO or CEO, their trips are a lot different. And then do you understand accessibility, right? And sometimes you have situational accessibility, such as I broke my arm. Well, it's not permanent, it should heal, right? Well, for a little while, you can only use one hand, right? But being able to talk about and give an example of universal design, I think is important, especially if you can talk about it on a project. I think the thing to talk about here is that you want to include all users and talk about people you interviewed. And really the key here is the second bullet. And I firmly believe this as part of my practice. Accessibility leads to innovation. There's way too many examples of inventors throughout history that were trying to reach out to a loved one, and a great innovation occurred. The phonograph, the telephone, these were examples of inventors. Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison were trying to reach out to different people, right, to family members, and accessibility led to great innovations. I would also talk about the importance of extreme users, right? So I talked about that spectrum. So we had infrequent traveler, a frequent traveler, and a VIP traveler. We need to know the nuance, is what I call it, knowing the nuance between those different types of people, because guess what? Those are markets. They have needs. And really, the extreme users are probably more important because they feel the pain a lot more. And if you can solve for the extremes, you pretty much take care of everybody in the middle, right? And you really sound super smart if you say, I try to mainstream the extreme. And I'm not saying have a door that, you know, Shaquille O'Neal could walk through. I'm not really trying to say that. What I'm trying to say there is, what are the needs that someone as big as Shaquille O'Neal has? How do we adapt for, you know, his needs? Is there a way to do that? You know, is there an adaptation for somebody in a wheelchair or somebody in a stroller? And there is, right? They're called ramps, they're called elevators. And do we make that look aesthetically good? So if you can talk about that, you're really practicing universal design. What's the next big thing in UX? right? They're kind of wrapping up stuff. And really, they're not asking that. They're asking about, are you passionate? Do you stay current? And then how do you stay current? So talk about the books, the blogs, and the podcasts, right? Explain what interests you, show your passion. And then how do you see a UX trend potentially contributing to the company's success, right? So AI, machine learning, talk about Web 3.0 like AR, VR, BCI, brain computing interfaces. How do all of those trends, how does a company like whatever you're applying for move from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0? That's a really cool thing to talk about. It shows your passion. How would you improve the UX of our product? Okay, now we're really getting into brass tacks. Did you research our company is what they're asking. Are you ready to hit the ground running? Are you full of ideas or just full of it? To be honest with you, that's what they're asking. You got to be diplomatic here. You're an outsider looking in. Tell them that up front. You don't have all the info. You don't know all the players. But explain, you're not privy to all the information, but maybe I checked out something on your site, and express how you would test these ideas with internal stakeholders, do that collaboration. You'd like to, talk to some users, but maybe give your first impressions of a website or a product or an industry. Okay. And that's what I think you can do to kind of talk through this particular question. Where do you go for UX design inspiration? It's again, are you constantly learning? Are you invested? Is it a career rather than a job? I tend to classify people in two ways, and this is just me as a hiring manager with about 15 years of experience hiring people. And you may not like the terms, but I hope you'll give me a little bit of latitude here. As a hiring manager, I tend to classify a worker either as a missionary or a mercenary. And both of those are really good. A mercenary is going to be a freelancer, but it could be an expert, such as an accessibility expert. I'll create a contract with them. We'll have a well-defined role, but if I'm going to hire someone permanent, I'm looking for a missionary. I'm looking for someone that's wants to be a part of a team, something bigger than themselves, right? So again, oh man, did I mess up? I messed up there, sorry. Let me just answer that, I'll go up. What am I doing? I have totally messed up here. I'm just gonna blindly go on to the next. Give me a little bit of latitude, maybe ask about that in questions. What I do with mercenaries, these are freelancers. I do try to have a well-defined contract. You're doing this and this, and there's kind of a framework that I use. When I'm doing missionaries, it's a longer conversation, and it's about, where do you see yourself in 5 years? How can I help you get there? I talk about the ladder that I've created, how they can grow, how they can learn with me, right? I would be super interested in this candidate. Common portfolio questions. We're going to do the same thing with the black and white. And again, there's the text and the subtext. In researching this particular section, I came across a bunch of different quotes. In a portfolio, I think that what people are really looking for is, what is your thought process? And it's really about storytelling and chunking information together. Anybody can show a picture of a great UI, but why is it great? I like that. What's the story behind it, right? You can pick out any of these quotes that you like. Let's get down to questions, right? So show me your portfolio. Seems like a simple enough question, but they're actually talking about, walk me through your process. What was your approach? What did you learn along the way? Again, talk about your overall approach. Don't just read your portfolio, though. They can read it, right? Describe the nuances of the problem, the solution, what you learned from your users, what you learned from your internal stakeholders, what you learned from your journey map. What did you learn when you were creating a persona? How did you adjust stuff after a usability test? What were some of those trade-offs that you had when you did some internal design reviews with developers? People want to know that, right? And it's really good when you start to show them your portfolio. The other thing is when you show them a portfolio, it's typically going to be on your favorite project, right? Which is the next question. Take me to some of your favorite pieces, right? It's usually what you're passionate about, what you're proud of, and they're really asking, do you like challenges? Because they want to know that they can work with you. Practice, practice, practice. If I gave you any advice for portfolio when they're reviewing it, practice, practice, practice. Don't just show media GAC, which is pictures. Talk about your collaboration, show your passion, tell your story. How did you contribute to this favorite piece? What were your challenges? How did you overcome them? In other words, humanize the story and you. Next, what was your design process for this particular piece? Ladies and gentlemen, I am amazed at designers that come in to talk about their portfolio and they're all over the place in designing in their design process. And one of the things that I really drill into the heads of my students at UNT and SMU is you got to have that. And if you can structure your piece, that kind of helps you to tell that story. But what's your design process? Why is this piece different than other ones? But it's also, how do you present yourself? Because they might want to envision you presenting in front of a customer, in front of an executive. So they're also kind of judging you a little bit on your presentation skills. So talk about research, design, and usability. Where did you make adjustments, collaboration, how you validated your design, and show how your process evolved and how your design evolved. If you can do that, you've really hit a home run describing your portfolio piece. What's your favorite project that you've ever worked on? I actually like this. It seems similar to the other one, but it's really about what brings you joy, what you're passionate about. How'd you overcome passion? And it's also kind of telling the people, what's this person like, right? And so it's really about passion, right? Instead of walk me through a piece, what was your favorite project? It's like saying, what do you do? And then what do you love to do? Those are different questions. And you can see how just the subtle changing of one word really makes it different. Well, you need to show passion projects early, because one thing for an introvert is you need to show passion. And this is a way, if this question gets asked, it's fantastic because, again, you get to show your personality, you get to describe how you've learned a lot, you highlight what you're enjoying, what excites you, and how that brought value to that particular project. Oh my God, Bob, can you believe that somebody would ask this question? Tell me about a time when a project didn't go exactly as planned. How did you fix it? Well, what they're really asking is, are you calm under pressure? Are you flexible? How do you solve problems? Do you get on your high horse and just preach at everyone, right? Do you fake it? Like all my projects went perfect every time? No, no. So what you say here is, look, I've had some projects that haven't went well. There's a lot of things outside my control. Budget cuts, timelines, we didn't get developers, but mention lessons that you've learned on these projects and how you use them now. So one thing that you might talk about is better planning, better communication, having internal meetings before presenting to a client, preparation determines success. Don't do any finger pointing here. This is just you as a professional explaining what you learned when something didn't go well. And it shows that you're flexible. And ladies and gentlemen, it actually shows you as being very mature. What sites or apps or designers do you love? And again, I kind of like this because they're telling you a couple of things here. What inspires you? Where do you go for inspiration? And what kind of designer are you? So when they ask this question, they're kind of talking to your inner self as opposed to the outer self, right? So again, we talked about that in the personal branding section. So this is a good question to get asked. So, you might talk about Google for function because it's got a great algorithm, but there's almost no aesthetics to it. You might use Netflix, Amazon, or something like that for recommendation engines. You might pick your own sites or apps, but don't just pick something, have a reason why you picked it. Again, preparation determines success. You might talk about people you follow on LinkedIn or podcasts that you listen to, books that you've read. Fantastic. But always have the explanation of why you picked it. What did you do on this project? And this is really kind of a problem question because what they're saying is, I don't really know what you did. And a lot of times it looks like a team project because it says, we did this, we did this, we did this. I'd mentioned before, you don't hire a team, you hire a person, right? So talk specifically about what you did. I did project management on this. I led user research. I contributed to the sketching sessions, but I built the discussion guide, right? I built the survey, right? You're explaining your roles, explaining where you provided value on a team-based project. This is really important if you have a lot of team-based projects and you're moving from campus to career. So you have these school-based projects. Many of them are going to be team-based, but you need to talk about your contribution. If you can avoid this question by really, I'll call it having a good portfolio case. You don't want them asking this question. If this is coming out in an interview, you need to revisit your portfolio and start to talk about your contribution. Where'd you struggle on a project? And again, I've kind of talked about this before, but if something looks too polished, what's happening in the hiring manager's heart is, oh my God, this is too good to be true. I can't believe this, right? So they'll start to second guess. Do you know why? They can't believe it because it's too good to be true. And then, did you iterate on this, or did you just settle on what somebody pushed through at you? Right? Talk about key findings, show before and after screens, talk about how you collaborated, how you iterated. It's okay to talk about key challenges, but also talk about how you overcome them. And then talk about how you validated everything that you did because you're doing research, research, research all along the way. Your research and design process should almost be, just like this, ladies and gentlemen, just two hands clasped together. Your research informs design, designs create something, people react to it, and you can change it and validate it at any time. All right, closing out, right? So let's say that you're in an interview and you feel like it's going pretty well, people can still mess up. So here's some questions that you might hear closing out an interview. And I will tell you, the great Pablo Picasso once said, finishing is better than starting. Ladies and gentlemen, don't wish someone luck. Wish them to be a finisher. We all start projects, but a lot of people never finish them. I'm not going to wish you luck because, again, preparation determines success, and we're not going to do wishful thinking here. I'm going to wish that you be a finisher, not a starter. So finish your resume, finish your personal branding, finish your resume, go on an interview and finish strong. I think Bob will like this slide. This is about the primacy and recency effect. So people quickly create an opinion about you within the first couple of minutes of an interview. We can't help it. We're human beings. The interesting thing, you see where it's intermediate, we have the dip down. Ironically, That's going to be when they're probably asking you questions about your portfolio. But as you start to finish out, you need to finish strong. Now, I'm not saying that, not answering all those questions about portfolio, you got to hit that out of the park. But it's interesting. We kind of naturally get bored after a little while, but it's the primacy and recency effect, right? But they will really recall how you started and how you finished. And then, okay, your portfolio, it kind of looked like Pablo's portfolio and it looked like this, good enough. And it's how you start and how you finish. That's what gets you across the finish line. All right, so in your interview, your initial intro, your brand, your resume, you may have some portfolio questions early on. We've kind of went over that, but your portfolio, your case studies, and your process, right? It's actually where it's dipping down, but it's not that it's not important. It is, but what sets you apart is your intro and follow-up. That's why I spent a lot of time in these sections. So there's this concept known as the peak end experience, right? It comes from Daniel, well, I'm going to bastardize his name, Kahneman. I hope I said that right. But, when you look at person one and person two looks like they have a higher net performance. They're energetic a few times, right? But if you look at person one, they have a much higher peak and they end strong. They're going to remember person one more than they're going to remember person two because they had higher energy. They ended on a high note. They're probably talking about what they're passionate about. So they're really doing a good job. So ultimately, after a few days go by, the person that is more memorable is person one because of the peak end experience. We know this in usability, right? The same thing happens in interviews. All right, so when you're closing out, here's a couple of questions that they might ask. Text, subtext. Do you have any questions for us? Oh my God, Bob, that's a trap too. They're really saying, look, man, this interview is about to end. Are you interested in this job? And they're also kind of in the back of their mind saying, is this person going to help me? Right? So you can have a couple of strategies here. If you don't like the job, ask nothing. No, I'm good. I'm fine. If you get a bad vibe, ask nothing. So you have choices here. You have options. You might ask a clarifying question about the job. Maybe you're not quite understanding what they want to do. There's a little bit of risk with that. If you ask a clarifying question, they might think that you're confused and they might think that you are a lesser designer or researcher than you really are. Or if you really like the job, you're getting a good vibe, you want to come with preloaded questions. And we're going to go over that here in a moment. I would say you might want to ask some preloaded questions for these reasons. It shows you're interested. It's a sign of respect. It shows you've been listening. It allows you to follow up. It also allows you to network with them. What's happening right now is that people are moving around a lot. We all know that. That person that maybe you network with after an interview might go to a company you're interested in. And man, if they remember you because you asked a good question, guess what? They may open a door for you later on. Here's some possible questions you might ask at the end of an interview. What's your most immediate need? What's the subtext there? How can I help out? What skills are you looking for in this position? What are some of your current challenges? How can I help out? What skills are you looking for in this position? You're basically asking, the subtext is, am I a match? How do you see me fitting into the team? What's your 30, 60, 90-day plan to get someone up to speed, right? To make them be productive. So the onboarding process really, ladies and gentlemen, is about having that new person come on and be productive as fast as they can. What's your future vision for the team? Is it growing? Is it flat? Do you want the research practice to blow up? I would ask, and by blow up, I mean in a good way, ladies and gentlemen, I would ask one or two of questions 1 through 6. And then the last question is, what's the next step? Now, if you're feeling particularly bold, you might ask, is there anything in my experience that makes you think I can't do this job? It's kind of a bold question. Do you need any more additional details about my resume or portfolio? Right? I think that's pretty good. Now, a successful close, I'm going to use this acronym, SELF, right? Skills, experience, likability, and fit. And here's the interesting thing about this. If you're getting an actual interview, they already like your skills and there's something in your experience that they find intriguing. It's really about likability and fit. So if we were to use a template, right? I'm a situational introvert, as I mentioned before. Here's a potential successful close. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. Based on what I've heard, I feel like I have the necessary skills and experience, the first S and E. I like what I've heard. I like the company direction. I like your team. It looks like a really good fit to me. I can't wait to hear from you soon. Thank you for considering me. That's it. Drop the mic. You've hit skills, experience. You've talked about like 3 or 4 times. You've also talked about fit, right? I call this a pre-buttal question, right? Or a pre-buttal statement. You're giving them every reason to say yes. Yes, yes, yes. He has the skill, he or she has the skills or experience. They really seem to like the job. I really see them as a good fit for the team. And you're showing excitement. And again, it goes back to self, skills, experience, likability, and fit. So when you close, when you're about to shake their hands or give them a high five, it could be virtual too, right? Do this type of close, right? So this is your homework. You also have this homework. Practice this, right? Be prepared though, ladies and gentlemen, for them to ask you a question. Maybe you have 2 or 3 portfolio examples. If they really like you, if they ask you this question, what else do you have? You need to have what I call a back pocket portfolio example. They're just saying, what else are you working on? And they're trying to like get some insight into your passion. And it's not showing all the polished case studies, right? So if they're asking you, what else do you have? Your interview's going really well. So that's what I have for tonight. That's my advice. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. And we'll pitch it back to Julia and we'll see if there are any questions that people have, and maybe we can just open it up. I'm going to get a swig of water.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brian. That was fantastic. Let's see. Chat.
I saw a couple of questions pop in along the way. I'm quickly trying to scroll back to see. Here's one from Valerie from earlier. Should we mention a cool project we worked on, even if they didn't ask in an interview situation?
Yeah, that's fine. You can always talk about what's cool. Try to make it relevant. So if you can make it relevant, and this is where I get into this concept I called story stacks. So what you might have is a cool research project, a cool design project, a cool persona project, a usability test, a cool service design project. But yeah.
And Leah asked, any advice on mitigating failure? So maybe if they ask about a project that you'd really prefer they not ask about in the interview.
Well, what if we changed fail to learn, right? So we learned a lot here, right? So this is a project where it was new and we were learning, we were experimenting, we were growing in this area. And while this project failed, those learnings got applied in another area. And there are other projects where those learnings really helped us out. right? So the design area may have failed, but the research and usability led to a better outcome, or we built personas that we didn't have before, or we built some components into, you know, our enterprise design language that we didn't have, which got used elsewhere. Switch, fail to learn is probably the most general advice I would give.
I like that. And then Rebecca, any tips for graphic designers looking to transition so you don't get the deep sigh, eye roll response?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I don't think that you should run away per se from graphic design. You have people that are building these enterprise design language, or you're a really good visual designer. If you're really into that, there are opportunities into that that maybe you can use that strength in a certain area. A lot of times what a UX designer will do is they will partner with a visual designer. So having that graphic design background isn't necessarily a weakness. If you can take a boot camp or go to Bentley or one of the other colleges and maybe get some refresher courses, I think it would be really easy to segue into a UX career.
Great.
I went from graphic design to UX, and I always like to think about how, you know, any solid graphic designer places function over form. And I think we follow you know, there's a process that we follow in graphic design too. I think the difference that I have sort of observed over time is that in graphic design, you're really celebrating the end product, the thing that we made that everybody saw or interacted with and they, you know, loved or whatever.
Right.
Whereas in UX, it's about the journey to get there and the information that and the insight that informed the decisions that were made along the way. And it's more about the outcomes that we accomplish versus that final output.
Yeah, I think it's the story becomes really important. I would totally agree with that, Christine.
There was a couple questions on cover letters. Any advice for cover letters? And are cover letters still relevant?
Yeah, I think that what you want to do there is, you know, I would think it's more of like a cover email more than anything. And, you know, keep it short. I don't know if you really need it as much now. I think it's more important to have the resume and get to the portfolio in your cover letter. If you're doing an email, you know, you might attach your resume and have a link to your portfolio. So you're really just getting to brass tacks right away. We don't have to be as formal as we used to be. Although I would say, you know, please use full words. Don't use the letter U for you, which I saw in a presentation. Wait for it in graduate school. And it was a title on a slide. And I'm like, oh my God. I don't think it's as important as it used to be. But if you're going to do it, keep it short, attach your resume, have a link to a portfolio.
Christina asked, some of my experience was prior to taking a break from the working world. So question is, how old can portfolio examples be?
That's a good question. You might want to do, you might want to help out a nonprofit, your church, a nonprofit, anything just to get some newer stuff. I wouldn't dismiss the older stuff because it can show process. And what I want you to think about is hiring managers also hire for potential, right? I hire for potential. And I think there are a lot of people out there that have imposter syndrome. And there are other things than just the visual design or the usability. Like if you're a mom or a dad or a coach or something like that, I already know you probably have really good time management skills and you can compartmentalize stuff and you know how to talk to people. That's very relevant. And a lot of times I feel like I can teach someone. So you don't necessarily have to have the newest, the greatest, and the latest. I would have some newer project, and it can be super small where you do a deep slice on something. So maybe, you research digital influencers in the travel industry, right? So who are macro, micro, and nano influencers in the travel industry, and then showcase that as a research piece in your portfolio. I don't think it would take that long. You could do it in a week and then have some of your other projects. Have your research project maybe a little bit sooner in your portfolio and you should be good to go.
That's great and very encouraging personally too. Koyal asks, how important is the background of working in similar products with the company you're interviewing? As an example, if interviewing for Amazon while having worked for Walmart as compared to interviewing for Amazon while having worked for Fidelity.
Yeah, again, that's going to depend upon really the hiring manager. It may give you a little bit of an edge when you go from, similar industry to similar industry. And again, what I tend to see down here in Dallas is we have a lot of banking here and insurance. There's a ton of it here. And it's one of these things of birds of a feather flock together. So once you get in there and you network, I just see people go from US Bank to USAA to, fill in the blank bank, Bank of America, Chase. We have a really big Chase bank now. And the goofy thing is they're all in the same district and sometimes across the street from one another. And you see them flocking. Oh my God, Martin got a job over here. And then, if you can leverage that, fantastic. If you're in something like retail or commerce, everybody's basically selling something. So you can use it in just about every industry. Travel is unique in that it's a very unique industry. I can be in a meeting, go to another meeting, and then another meeting. And I can be talking to someone at a different company. They can be a customer in the first meeting, and they can be a competitor in the next meeting. And then we might have a new project where we're co-designing something or trying to talk about standards. So it's really bizarre, but if you can leverage it, leverage it.
We have a couple more questions. I'm just going to share my screen so everyone can see the upcoming meetings as well. So that's there. Keith has a question. Self-taught UX design. My resume consists of marketing and graphic design experience. How can I adjust my resume to apply for a UX design position with no direct work experience and only one UX portfolio project?
So first thing is you need to get another portfolio project. You need to have, I would say at least 2 or 3. It's the same advice, just take a deep slice and research something. I don't think that you run away from your background. In fact, you kind of embrace it, but you position yourself in that in your marketing role that you had, you position yourself as this really helped me to understand users. I had to talk to stakeholders. We were able to get some early adopters of the product, right? So you're starting to position some of those past experiences to read more like a user experience resume. And then if you had sales or engineering, again, you're talking to customers, things like that. And if it's engineering, you're probably working with the front end and back end and overcoming obstacles, but you're just positioning it in such a way that what you're basically wanting to do is say every job that I've ever had, basically I can apply that and bring that to the table as a designer or a researcher.
Michelle asked, any portfolio advice for a UX researcher?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes. Can I take the screen back and show a couple of examples?
Yes.
Okay. Because I thought this question might get asked. We were talking about it a little bit earlier, Julia.
How do I make you?
The obligatory, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, there it is. The participants can now see your screen. This is Brittany Shirley. I actually believe that research and strategy are kind of very closely aligned. This is her Navi Buddy app on, there was, parking was a big problem. So again, she shows, here's what the app is. This is kind of our problem that we're covering. This is my contributions, and look at all the research stuff that she was doing. And yeah, she contributed to, low fidelity sketching, but then they have a video that you can watch. They did a marketplace scan, feature-based inspection. They did design research, not user research, design research. So what are competitors doing? And here, this was an amazing stat. Parking takes up 1/3 of the land area in every major city because these cities want to have economic development. I want you to think about that for a moment. 1/3 of the area in all major cities in the United States is taken up by a parking lot. So here's empathy map, stakeholder, here's personas. Then you get into the journey map. Here's some epics and user stories. She sketched out storyboards, but she had somebody else illustrate them. So here's a storyboard, and then here's how those epics and user stories fit in. Here's sketches that she and her team did. Here's a workflow. They went from this type of a sketch to a prototype to this type of an interaction. I believe they used Adobe XD. You can see the prototype. And again, she's not talking necessarily about the prototype. Here's a usability test, the SUS survey, feedback. She did the lean canvas herself. All right, so I had mentioned to Julia, this is a school teacher who took 2 of my classes. She's been one of my students for about 8 months. She went in for a summer internship with a major retail brand. They didn't give her the internship, they gave her the job, right? So this is an example of a research and strategy portfolio. Wonderful person here. She still has a lot to learn. She was a school teacher for 7 years. Brittany took a couple of these classes with me, and she was able to create some really good portfolio pieces. So this is, to me, a pretty good example of a research/strategy one. I'm going to go to my son's. So this is my son. He's a designer at USAA. This was him at Big Design a few years ago. Sean is all of 23. He built a remote check-in for COVID-19 patients last summer during the pandemic for a startup, and he was paid. But he talks about his roles. Here's all the research. And again, on this, he just has some logos. He has some standard photos. Some of these are staged, but what are the key findings? This is a really terrible persona. He built that in PowerPoint, threw it on here, but they don't really care so much about that. They just like that he did a persona, and he's talking about daily tasks, wants, needs, frustrations. Then he gets into designs. And again, here's a negative screening. Okay, so, oh my God, or this is great. They can come in, they don't have COVID. Positive screening, oh my God, they have COVID. They tell them what to do. Here's some of the screens that he built. He walks them through a flow. This is actually him prepping for usability tests. Here are the results. They screened 500,000 patients in the first 6 months of the year, last year. So he's showing like real results. Here's another example from a student. She's only had one of my classes. Lizzie Neal is her name. She built this in a tool called UX Folio. Safe Space is her case study. Again, she kind of has her process right there. This is her design challenge. This was her roles. Notice how Lizzie has team project management. So she really took it by the reins. Here's a key mistake. As we began, we outlined what we were solving. I'm not hiring your team, Lizzie, I'm hiring you. And again, look at her bullets here, that's off. But her design is slowly improving, right? So this is a first cut of it. And you can see, okay, she has a process. She has a workflow. Here's the workflow for a first-time user. Here's their blue sketches in XD. Here is their old sketches. Here's their prototype, kind of the before and the after of the workflow. The landing page, lo-fi. She has a graphic design background. So what she did is, here's my visual design, right? So I took this mood board. What were the fonts that I used? What was my design system, right? So she threw all of that. Then she has a walkthrough, a testable landing page, some big numbers, right? Findings after the test. You should move it after that, before that banner. Before and after screens. She has a testimonial at the end. So she's updated this. Then she has next steps. She updated this today after some initial feedback from last night. So anyway, those are how you can do a better portfolio. This should be kind of an audio visual aid, if you will, in your interview, right? So these are students and my son. So if they can do it, y'all can do it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, I think we are at the end of our time together this evening. I'm sorry we didn't get to a couple questions, so feel free to put them in our LinkedIn group or on the Slack channel, and we'll try to get you some good answers. Thank you so much, Brian, for spending time with us and sharing so much. It was a fantastic presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your fantastic questions and your comments and your stories. This was one of my favorite meetings I think we've had since I've been involved. So just thank you so much, everyone. And we really appreciate you being here. Next month, we'll have Peter and friends on how our values and beliefs have guided UX careers. September is a session on how UX has adapted to the pandemic. In October is a UX debate. We're still looking for volunteers about that. In November, we have an open spot. So if you've been inspired by Brian sharing his information and his stories tonight, maybe it's your turn. So let us know if you're interested. And thank you again so much, Brian, and everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Everyone stay cool.
Yes, you especially, Brian.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone.
Hydrate, hydrate.
Yes. Stay safe, all.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Brian. That was wonderful. Bye.
Good night.
Thank
All right, bye, y'all. Thanks for the opportunity, Julia, Tara.
you so
Really
much.
appreciate it.
It's fantastic.
And I have another like talk on imposter syndrome and how to deal
Oh,
with
I need
that.
that one.
That one too.
Yeah, that one's tough with especially college students.
Yeah.
People like Brittany transitioning, or even my son. Well, I'm just a college student. I'm just this, or I come from this type of industry into this. And to me, I think you give that a big hug and leverage that. All right, I'm going to drop off.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
All right, who do I assign this to? I think I need to. It's telling me to assign and leave. Oh, good God, I don't want to. Oh, I guess I'll assign. I'll just leave.